There's more mischief, mayhem, and nefarious goings-on in the city of brotherly love than Billy Penn could have ever imagined. We've got it all here on the Twisted Philly podcast. True crime, haunted history, the coolest and creepiest places to visit. Welcome to Twisted Philly.
Hey Twisters, what up? I'm Dina Marie, your host for the Twisted Philly podcast. The last few days have been truly incredible for me because after almost 9 months of flying solo, this is my third time sitting down with an amazing female guest host in 72 hours. I don't know how I got so blessed. I'm so freaking excited, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm fangirling a little bit right now. Tonight, I'm hanging out with the host whom I believe is one of the absolute coolest women in podcasting. It's Juliet Miranda from the Unwritable Rant podcast. Hey, Juliet.
Hey there. How you doing?
I'm doing great tonight. How are you?
Oh, fabulous. Great to be talking with you finally.
Do you have a glass of bourbon with you tonight?
I absolutely do.
Would you share what you're drinking?
Of course. It's actually an aged bourbon. It's called Forged Oak, and it's part of a Lost Barrel collection. So it was rescued from a rick house way back in Kentucky, and then it was aged for 15 years, and I managed to score a bottle of it. It's fantastic.
So you have to explain to me what mouthfeel is, because I hear you say that on your show, and I hear Nick and Justin from the Epic Film Guys use that phrase as well, and I have no idea what it means.
It's sort of the way the bourbon feels in your mouth when you roll it around. You know, does it feel thick? Does it feel thin like water? Does it leave a coating? That's kind of what the mouthfeel is.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me an education. It reminds me a little bit of legs when folks are talking about wine and body.
That is exactly what it is.
Makes total sense. So first, I have to say thank you. The opportunity to record with you was such a surprise for me. A very dear friend of mine was talking with your guy about going on another show, and suddenly I received a message asking me, guess who would like to talk with you? And I think I screamed. Actually, no, I think I said, are you fucking kidding me? And if you listen to Twisted Philly, I know you do. You know I say fuck, so you can be as open as you want. And clearly he wasn't kidding because you're here. So would you take a few minutes and tell Twisted Philly listeners about your show, The Unwritable Rant?
Sure. It's a combination of storytelling. So they're my stories, experiences that have happened to me over the course of my life and what I'm doing today with my guy. And they're also interviews with celebrities. So I'll talk to people like Mike Rowe or Ed Begley Jr. and get their stories and find out, what makes their lives so interesting.
Now, you spent some time in the music industry, didn't you?
Sadly, yes.
Some of your stories, especially one of my favorites, the interview with Bon Jovi, was from your days there. How did you make a transition from being in that industry and having that career to writing and podcasting?
Well, I think they're all sort of interlinked in one way or another. And it just started with my love of music and my love of storytelling. So I started writing as a rock writer because I wanted to share my love of music with the world. That kind of evolved into journalism and communications, and I published a book a few years ago. So once I discovered that people don't read, I wanted to find a new way to share my stories, and that happened to be podcasting.
I'm so glad you did. I found your show back in the fall as part of the Podern Family hashtag from Nick and the Epic Film Guys. He talked about your show so much, and I was addicted from the first episode I listened to. When I listened to you talk about a few of your less than stellar choices and ex-boyfriends, my first thought was, this is my soul sister.
Well, we all do it, and that's part of the fun, is sort of commiserating in the misery.
You actually got me to try bourbon, which is something I never thought I would ever do. I think it was episode 78 when you and Crazy Town started a daycare.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I got to ask you about that one. But you mentioned a particular bourbon. Was it Ridgemont?
Ridgemont Reserve.
Thank you, Ridgemont Reserve. And I remember you mentioning it was fruity and easy to drink. I went looking for it and I couldn't find it, but I was at a friend's house and her husband is a bourbon drinker. I said, you just gotta give me a tiny little bit because I've never tasted this before. And he took it easy on me. He put it over ice and it was really something. And now understanding what the word mouthfeel is, now what I experienced makes sense. It was rich and it was a little spicy. And so yeah, I think it's something I'm gonna try occasionally now because of you.
Oh, I love hearing saying that. I mean, bourbon is just like wine in that it's an experience. You know, you want to enjoy it and savor it.
You know, there was something else. I mentioned that episode number 78. There was something else in there that connected with me. And I sort of pictured you as you were telling the story about one of your professional experiences with the bitter busybodies who reported you to HR for giving your guy a kiss after you went to lunch. You know, I wonder why it is today in 2017 that some women still don't get how easy it is to support one another instead of trying to compete with each other. Thinking about that, I was wondering what your experiences as a woman in podcasting have been over the last almost 2 years now that you've been doing your show.
It's been very mixed. I think some of the challenges that I face are very similar to what everybody experiences, and that's trying to build an audience and really just trying to be taken seriously as a podcaster. I think my frustrations come from the fact that, generally speaking, people tend to assume that my producer, who's also my husband, writes all my content.
And that's a really unfair assumption, as if you aren't experienced or witty or creative enough to develop your own content.
Right. You know, once you get past, the hurdle of people trying to figure out what podcasting is, then they just assume, oh, well, you're somebody's co-host, or, oh, somebody's writing your material for you. So I think it's a constant challenge just to be, taken seriously and accepted for it.
I don't disagree at all. I think sometimes I tend to have more male friends than female friends just because my sensibilities seem a bit more male. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Oh, I'm the same way.
I think also when you have a bit of a niche podcast where you don't necessarily fit into one very clear genre or one very clear box, you have a bit of a tougher time getting folks to jump on board and really immerse themselves in it and invest themselves in it.
Well, and it's so hard too, there are so many podcasts out there. You have to sift through these very murky waters where there's tons of content and tons of people doing it. It's really hard just to be heard in general.
There's even a podcast called Everyone Has a Podcast.
Exactly. And everybody does.
They do. So have you had an opportunity, do you have a network of female hosts that you connect with or folks that you can toss ideas off of?
I'm very much a loner when it comes to what I do. I've been this way since I was a kid. I've always had a very hard time embracing a group mentality. And it's only been within the last couple of months that I've started reaching out specifically to more female podcasters because I want to find out what they're doing. I realize I'm in a position now where I can really learn from other people who've been doing this and who are experiencing the same things that I am. So I recently just joined a very small little group of female podcasters who are just talking about their experiences, and I'm having a blast listening. I'm having a very hard time personally sharing my own stories because I'm a loner. It's very hard for me to open up to people.
I totally get that. I connected with a woman who does a true crime show out here in Philadelphia because I could tell from the show that she was from Philadelphia. I could tell from her accent. It was very similar to mine and just reached out to her to say, look, you're in Philly. I'm in Philly. I'm starting a show. Maybe we could connect once in a while. And she was kind enough to invite me into a community of other women who host specifically true crime. And my show is not all true crime. And it's an amazing bunch of women. And they were so terrific about sharing experience and sharing what their journey has been. It resonates so much what you're saying with getting to that same place where I felt like I could start sharing just as much and being less of an observer. I think my experience as a single parent, I'm in that space where it's like I get used to doing everything on my own.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very easy to get wrapped up in your own little world, but to step outside of it really does take a bit of bravery.
And I have to say, the guys in the Podern family circle are fantastic. They're like big brothers, and I feel like sometimes I'm the little sister in a frat house with these guys.
I know. I feel the same way. I adore them. I have never met just a more fun, supportive group of people anywhere. And, I've been a member of writers' circles before, but these podcasters are so supportive. And I think that's because it's such a new medium and we're all kind of on a very level playing field.
Well, and there's the expression, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
And so there's an opportunity through really community, I think, for everyone to experience some of the success together. So I know that you are a fan of Rob and Slim, as am I.
I love those maniacs.
I had the opportunity to go to Jersey and sit with them for 5 hours. And
whoa.
Yeah.
And you walked out unscathed, I hope.
walked out alive. I walked out with all my limbs.
It's funny. Rob was in Chicago a while back, and David and I met up with him for drinks, and we got him so drunk. We did a little bit of damage to Rob. I felt bad about it afterwards, but
I have a feeling he probably enjoyed every minute of it.
He seemed to be. We poured him into a cab and sent him on his way, so hopefully he made it back.
I'm guessing he did, because he was back in Jersey just a month or two ago. That was an insane experience. Now, have you been on their show?
I have. I was on twice, and I'm going to be on again, actually, in a couple of days. I think it's for their final episode.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They're taking their summer break.
Yeah.
The night that I was hosting with them, we had the creator of Kindred Homecomings.
Oh, Todd, yeah.
Yes, Todd was on. So, of course, I'm a major horror junkie, and I'm a bit of a comic junkie as well. Girl, how did you wind up as Sheriff Melinda Clare in Snug Comics' Kindred Homecoming?
It was a total fluke. Todd was actually a fan of the podcast, and he reached out to me one day and said that he's working on this comic series based on the 80s horror movie The Kindred. And I'm, too, a huge horror movie fan, so all he had to do was say horror comic, and I was in. So it's been an incredible experience. He's a lot of fun to work with, and he's based the character a lot on my personality. So in the comic book, she uses phrases that I use frequently just so that she really seems like me.
I definitely picked up on that. So I got the digital version of issue number 1. And then today I went online and ordered the actual comic version because I definitely want to have the tangible comics. Some of the artwork, there's just a certain smile, and I look at it and it looks just like the smile in your podcast. And I think they really nailed it.
It's so crazy just seeing myself in comic book form. I always kind of wanted to be a Muppet, and this is just as good.
Did you have an opportunity to work face to face with Todd? Did you meet Jamie Bernadette, or was this all done virtually?
It's all been done virtually. He lives out in California, and me being in Chicago, we had to just do it all, via Skype, via, phone conversations and pictures over email. It's crazy how much can be accomplished now just with a laptop.
So since we're talking about horror, I have to ask you, Freddie or Jason?
Oh, Freddie. Absolutely.
Oh, yay. I'll have to show you. I had it on Twitter a while ago. This is actually how I connected with Nick and Justin. I'm a bit of a special effects nerd with makeup, and I did a deconstructed version of Freddy Krueger for Halloween a few years ago.
Ooh.
It's a little bit of latex, not as, not the full burn face, but I definitely Freddie over Jason any day of the week.
Wow. So do you have a favorite horror movie?
Oh, God, that's hard.
I know. It's incredibly hard, but I'm very curious.
God, I do love the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I really do. I love the old ones, though. I really love the classics. Night of the Living Dead.
Sure.
And I'm a sucker for the campy Evil Dead series.
Well, they're just so over the top. It's like, a graphic novel in movie form.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you?
Well, I'm a big fan of the 70s exploitation style stuff.
Okay.
So the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Hills Have Eyes. The more gritty and realistic it is, the better. I like it.
Nice. Very nice. Have you ever seen Black Christmas, the original one from the 70s?
Absolutely.
Oh, isn't that great?
It's so good. It's so good.
That is one of my Christmas traditions. I know I bake cookies too, but my Christmas tradition is watching watching Christmas horror movies. It really is.
I love it.
Talking about Christmas reminded me of the Christmas episode you had this year, and I loved listening to the story about when you were 11 and the letter that you wrote to John Stamos. Juliet, I think about that and I picture myself sitting on my bed, my peach bedspread, reading Tiger Beat and Teen Beat, and I could just picture you with your girly stationery and your heart-shaped pencil.
It was a very special moment. I poured my heart out in that letter.
I'm sure you did, and I would have thought the same thing, that John Stamos actually wrote directly to me.
And who knows, I don't know who got my letter. It doesn't really matter. I just know that getting something back saying, you're not alone, it's going to be okay, just made my day.
I'm not going to get into too many of the particulars with it, but you kind of did that for me a couple weeks ago. And I reached out to you on Twitter and you were so gracious and kind about the note that I sent you. But one of your episodes did that for me. So I definitely understand the feeling, even at 47 and not 11, when you feel like somebody else understands. And it was fantastic.
That's why I do this, because I love to make connections with people that way. And just you saying that, it makes everything all the more worthwhile, knowing that, you responded that way. I love it. I can't thank you enough for telling me about that.
Well, I thank you for listening. It was great. It really was. So when we were chatting online a little bit before we set time to record together, you mentioned that you have a little bit of a twisted tale from your childhood.
I do.
Would you be willing to share that with the Twisted Philly listeners?
Of course, I'd love to. I grew up in a very small town outside of Chicago, and it was an undeveloped area. My dad bought this plot of land in the middle of nowhere, and right next to where our house was built was this big sort of open field. And back in the 60s, apparently there was a grisly murder with a shovel. Some guy was just beaten to death with a shovel, and it was always this crazy sort of lore. You know, nobody wanted to go in the prairie. Nobody wanted to go in the field. And my mother was convinced, and she still is to this day, that whoever was murdered in that field moved into our house and started haunting it when we lived there.
Wow. What type of experiences did you have that led your mom to believe that?
My mother is a little bit of I guess she's a little bit of a pagan. She used to sort of practice Wicca.
Yeah. Rock on, Juliet's mom.
So she was always just very in tune to changes in the atmosphere. So occasionally she would just feel as though there was someone with us. And every so often, you would just get the impression that things were moving. It was never like, there was never a spectral orb of light. Chairs weren't moving around on their own. But every so often, it just felt as though things were moving behind you or moving next to you. And it wasn't the wind. It was just a change in the energy near you.
I absolutely believe some people are just intuitive enough to sense something like that.
I think so too. And I really believe that it has a lot to do with just the energy that's around us and the way, our life force moves through it.
One of the houses that I grew up in it was new construction. My father had bought a piece of land very similar and had a house built. Never had any experiences when we lived there, and we lived there for quite a while. Decades later, I reconnected with our old neighbors, and they said, what would happen? What used to happen when you guys lived there? And I said, nothing happened. What are you talking about? The people that moved in after us had an exorcism in our old house. Yes.
Whoa.
And they said it was the spirit of an old woman. I don't know that it was nefarious, but there was enough activity, at least according to the family that bought the house when we sold it, that it made them uncomfortable and felt they needed to bring in an expert to expel the energy. My grandmother lived with us for a while before she passed away. She didn't pass away in the house, but she did live there shortly before she finally moved on. So hearing that it was an older woman, I always wondered, God, I wonder if that was my grandmom. But when I think about my grandmom, when I think about her personality, she would have no interest in bugging any of us. She'd be like, please, I am out of here. I'm going to go relax. I'm going to go have a little nip of sherry, because that's what she used to do when she thought nobody was looking. And she's going to go hang with Grandpa. But yeah, they had an exorcism, which I didn't even think people still did exorcisms in modern day, but apparently they do.
Wow. Well, maybe it was something that they brought with them. It certainly doesn't sound like anything was there to begin with.
That's what I thought too, that, this was baggage they carried into the house. It wasn't anything residual.
Right.
You mentioned orbs. Shortly after my daughter was born, we would notice that she was constantly moving one of her hands in the air in front of her. A friend of mine had said, you need to just start taking pictures, not necessarily of her, but of everything around her. So we did, and every picture came back with a little ball of light in it.
Wow. Yeah. You gotta wonder about stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and she'd had a difficult birth. She had some pretty severe birth injuries. She's great today. She's unbelievable. And so when I saw that, I thought, well, maybe somebody's just here keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, maybe it's just a little bit of guidance.
There is so much more in this world than I think any of us will ever understand. So before I let you go, you mentioned Mike Rowe, and I know you've interviewed Eric Roberts, and you've had some terrific musicians on your show. Is there anything special coming up that you can share with folks? Anything you want to reveal, or is that kept under the radar a little bit?
We try to keep all that under the radar.
Yeah.
Actually, as it is right now, we're taking a little bit of time off for the summer because my guy and I do so much traveling that it's incredibly difficult for us to schedule time to do interviews at all. We're on the road 3-4 days a week. So for the next month or two, we're going to be kind of laying low as far as the celebrity interviews go, but we do have a couple lined up for the autumn that are tremendously cool.
Well, I will be looking forward to that for sure. Juliet, where can listeners find you? Your website, social media presence?
The best place to go is the unwritablерant.com. Everything is there. You will find links to my social media pages. You'll find links to the podcast, and you'll find links to all of my old writings and my book.
I found some of your essays and I've enjoyed them very much, especially the one, Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love. I'm a big Cole Porter fan, so my eyes instantly jumped to the title of that essay.
Oh, I love it. That's one of my very favorites. It's just so, I feel like it's atmospheric and just captures that bar so perfectly.
It is, and I've been there. It's probably been at least 10 years, and it's just such a magnificent space. You know, when you talk about energy and atmosphere, you feel it. You absolutely feel it there.
It's the perfect place to drink.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight. I really appreciate everything you shared about your show and your experiences in podcasting, and I love knowing, you know, that you have had some paranormal experiences as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, you know what? It's shared ground. I love it.
It is. And I have to tell you before you go, I think for some of my friends through the years, especially in my late teens and early 20s, I was their crazy town.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's perfect. Well, you and I, absolutely. One of these days, we're going to have to find a way to make it happen. We're going to have to go out and cause some trouble.
Yeah, I think we would get into some mischief.
I think so.
It was great chatting with you. Thank you, Juliet.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Take care.
You too.
I have to give a huge Twisted Philly what up to Juliet Miranda, the host of the Unwritable Rant podcast. She made my week, my month. It was so great having her on the show, and you guys have heard me talk about her show before. It's definitely one of my favorites. New episodes come out on Sunday mornings, and what I love to do is keep an eye on my phone and wait for that little red #1 to pop up on the Apple Podcast app. I get my chamomile tea. If it's nice out, I go sit out on my back deck and I check out Juliet's latest episode. As she said, you can find out everything about her show and her social media presence on her website at theunwritablерant.com. I want to thank you guys for listening, and please do yourselves a favor. Check out The Unwritable Rant. It's funny, it's honest, it's authentic, and it's just always such a joy to listen to. Ciao for now, Twisters.